Welcome to the With Winning in Mind podcast. I'm Heather Sumlin with Troy Bassham, and today I'm surprising Troy.
Yes. With what?
We're going to talk about your book, Fore the Mind. We're going to talk about how you got involved with golf, how the mental management applies to golf. We're going to tackle golf today.
All right.
Oh,
I'm
but
ready.
wait, though. We have to start with something.
What?
So a few weeks ago, we talked about in the life mottos, if y'all haven't watched that podcast, we talked about a word of the year.
Word of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And you've been challenged to come up with a word of the year.
Yes.
And have you?
I think so.
Okay.
I think the word of the year is going to be change. I need a change.
Change. And what are we changing?
Change a lot. I need change a lot. I need change the way I do things that are going to help be more organized, more efficient, more effective, that kind of stuff.
Awesome.
You know, changing your schedule on a daily basis that be more productive, more organized.
So do you feel like you've gotten into the same, like, in kind of like the reason that I wanted my word to be active is I felt like I was in almost a rut of doing the same thing all the time?
Yeah, it's similar to that. Because I want to be more active in some areas, but I need to change how I do certain things so I can be more efficient. I try to kind of go with the flow.
Mm-hmm.
And on Wednesdays, I can. On Wednesdays, I'm specific, okay, I'm going to do this, this, this.
Right.
And so for the most part, I'm going podcast in the morning, I go to academy in the afternoon, and, you know, I have a set schedule every Wednesday. So I don't have to worry about it. And then but for the rest of the week, I don't have a set schedule. I kind of go with the flow of things. And so if I change having more of a set schedule of, okay, this is the time period I need to do Zoom sessions. This is the time period I do, you know.
So you're changing your schedule.
Changing schedule, I think, would be very helpful.
So time management. I love it.
Yeah.
Nice.
I need to get back to that. So
Yeah.
I got to change that.
Awesome. I like it. Change.
So we're going to change.
Good deal. So every now and again, I'm going to check in on you and see what kind of change is happening.
Hopefully it's good.
It'll be great. Okay, so you got started in golf, but how? How? Because you were a rifle shooter growing up, and that's where you were utilizing mental management at the junior academy before you ever even started working for mental management directly. When did you transition from target sports like shooting sports to teaching golfers?
Well, I always liked the sport of golf growing up. You know, Brian and I play for fun, but we never had a set of golf clubs growing up. We never took lessons growing up, but we would go play. And so when we were in college, we put our money together. We invested in a set of golf clubs that we shared. And so when we'd go play, we could never go at the same time. We'd go with a group of friends. So one had the set of clubs, I had the set of clubs. So we always enjoyed the sport growing up. When I was at the Army Marksmanship Unit, and I was in charge of the junior program there, one of the things that I did that I think helped elevate the success of the program was I started teaching concepts of With Winning Mind early in the beginning. And everyone that you talk to that's a golfer says, oh, man, what you're sharing with these people would work for golf. So now fast forward, I'm working with the company, and Lanny's getting the same thing told. You know, hey, have you worked with golfers? Have you worked with golfers? Have you worked with golfers? And then one day we get a phone call from a guy, a prominent individual that we know in the sporting clays world to say, I am having a meeting with this golfer, a well-known golfer. He needs help in the middle game. You need to meet him. He set up a meeting, and that kind of launched us really into working with PGA Tour players. And then that got us connected with some other people in there. And then by 2006, I was the mental coach for the Jim McLean's Junior Academy. Did that for about 6 years. 3 years, I was with another Junior Academy, and then went back to working as the mental coach for Jim McLean Academy. Then that was bought out by one of his people, and who now owns Crown Golf Performance. And now I do the mental program for their academy, doing that for the last 4 years. So being in golf, what we teach in mental management, it just intertwines perfectly, in my opinion. And if you ask most golfers, and when I say most, I'm talking 90% of the golfers you talk to, if you ask them what percentage of golf is mental, they give you a high number, like 80, 90% of the game they give you. And so to me, it's like, okay, I want to tackle that sport. And since it's not shooting sports, I like it because I've been around shooting sports all my life. I love shooting, like shooting. But to me, golf and the mental game just partner up really, really good.
Well, and golf is a target sport still.
Definitely point-to-point sport, just a different way of getting the projectile to the the object that you need.
To the target.
But yeah, so when I started working with the junior academy, that's when we started, because I was able to work with young people at age 10. And then I was also helping tour players. So, I mean, people that were up in there as old as 50.
Right.
And so that's a wide range of people and a wide range of levels that you have. But what I found is a 12-year-old can run a mental program just as effective as a 30-year-old.
Right.
They just need the tools on how to run a consistent mental system. And that's what we provide. We provide a mental system, which means, hey, here's a thought process defined that interlinks with what you're physically doing to allow you to have consistency on the course.
What I really appreciate about For the Mind, the mental program for golf, which is the book that you've written, is that it is so easy to read. And even though I don't play golf, I've never picked up a golf club unless you count Top Golf or mini golf. I have never played actual golf. But I was able to read the book and still gain information that's beneficial to me and everything that I do. And so I love the storyline. I love the concepts. I love how you apply it within the book. So how did you come up with the idea?
So when I look, when you get into golf, one thing that's really good about the sport of golf, if you look at most sports, there's not a lot written on the mental game outside of golf. Golf has, I think, more written in the mental game than any other sport out there. And there's a lot of good books out there on the mental game. There's some really good writers. And you'll have some pop up over and over. And when you read it, there's a lot of, this is what you should do. Right. But I couldn't find very much on how to do anything. There's not how-to books. They're like informational books, which information is important. I'm not discounting information. I'm just thinking it doesn't go far enough. What if we had something that went a little further than that to where someone would read it and then they have a better idea of how they can apply it to what they do? The other thing is I had already written a book called Attainment that was written in a first-person perspective, and it was more of an informational type book that addressed things that I felt like were needed that With Winning Mind didn't address. But with a golf book, I wanted something that went a different direction. I wanted not just what, I wanted a how. And then I came up with the idea that I should have a story. I don't know why I decided to have a story, because writing in third person is much more difficult and challenging in my view.
But it's so much more fun to read. So much more fun to read.
Wow. And my original idea was to have a 3-part series of a journey of a player that was struggling. So I wanted a professional tour player that made it but couldn't crack through and win, and had all the skill but just didn't have that mental thing that needed.
So if there's enough interest, you'll write the second.
Well, the original one was, the first one I was going to tackle what we would say preload mental program, which
is what you've done here.
Yeah, what you do mentally in a pre-shot routine. The second one was to tackle struggling with pressure and guiding that player through how to handle that. And the third one was about building self-image. How do you gain the confidence that you can continue to be successful? So the idea was like a trilogy. Well, I got the first one written. It took 3 years to write it, and it was very difficult to do. And I'm like, man, I just don't know if I want to do this 2 more times.
But you may, because you're all about change now.
Well, if I sell a million copies of that, then I will definitely write 2 more.
Absolutely. I think that's the challenge.
There's a challenge. Got to.
But honestly, what is the right age bracket? I know anybody can gain from reading the book, but were you targeting any type of age when you were writing it, or is it good for absolutely anyone?
anyone, any age. I mean, the audience, the story is about a tour player that is struggling, and then he gets these letters in his bag, and they're like mini lessons on the mental game. And him and his caddy are taking these letters and discussing how to apply it to his game, and they start building a mental system throughout the journey of the story. So there's a little bit of a Yoda character and a Luke Skywalker type of character in their journey, and so it builds up to where you're trying to figure out, okay, who is this person leaving these lessons, and what's the next lesson that's coming up, and what would I do if I was in Kevin's shoes? Kevin's the name of the player, and so if I was in his shoes, what would I come up with? And so it's kind of leading the person to where they can develop their own mental process before the shot, and not just what do I physically do when I'm over the ball, but what do I mentally need to think about? So the journey takes them through that, and most people that are going to read this are competitive golfers. Well, who's a competitive golfer? It's not just your tour players. It's your collegiate players, your high school players, your junior players, your club players that want to go to the club championship. And these individuals want to know and how to get an advantage just as easy as the best of the best want to have an advantage. And that's really what I want to target, something that would help everyone from a high school level player or junior player, could even be in junior high, if you will, all the way up to someone who's on the tour that could get something out of this. And so I knew I had a good book when I took it and I sent it off to a tour player that had won several times on tour, that was been on tour for several years, that would be like, okay, he's going to give me an honest answer. And he's like, how'd you come up with that idea? He said, that was just spot on. That was really, really good. And he was impressed because the golf term, since I didn't grow up as a golfer, how did you do that? Well, before I finalized the copy and sent it to him, I took my first manuscript and I sent it to Cameron Doan, probably the smartest person I know in golf. And he was one of the early people that we met in the golf industry that said, hey, this really applies to the sport. Now, what's interesting is we actually went to college together, didn't know it.
Oh, really?
He was 2 years ahead of me at UTEP.
Oh, that's so cool.
But I said, hey, I'm writing this book. Would you be willing to read it? He goes, absolutely. He reads it. And there's a couple golf sections in there. And he just said, hey, if you were a player, you'd be thinking this way. And it kind of put me more into the trenches. I'm like, wait a minute, I could really get into the character more. And so I took what he was suggesting and got more into the character to build it. And then when I got done, he says, oh, yeah, this is great. He goes, this would, any level. And this is a guy who's not only been a teaching professional and in the golf business for many, many years, but he's also played at the PGA Tour level. So he said this would apply to anybody. And I'm like, okay, great. That's what I wanted to hear from a person that I trusted and have faith in, that's going to steer me in the right direction and not throw, not blow smoke. He's going to say, look, that's legit. Because you have books that you read and you're like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
Right? I did not want that to be that. And I don't think we have that. I think we have quite the opposite. I think we have a book here that when people read it, they're like, okay, got it. A lot of the stuff that's in the book, people probably to some degree already do. But maybe it's not organized in a way. Maybe there's a piece that's missing that this will give them the answer to that.
So in your opinion, after working with golfers for so many years, what do you think is the biggest struggle that they have with the mental game? And what's a takeaway that you could give right here that would help a golfer who's watching?
Well, there's two. One would apply to the book. The other one would not. The one that that's not addressed in For the Mind would be many players struggle with responding to a shot. They react to a shot. What I mean by that is a player will hit a shot they don't like and they react to it. They get emotional about it. They might hit a great shot and get emotional. In that case, I would say that's good. But they don't have a pre-planned way on how do I handle a shot regardless of what the result is. There's no thought about that. I think there's an opportunity that they're missing there. The other thing is that most golfers are not very good at having a pre-planned, consistent mental process when they're playing the game.
Do you feel like they have a pre-shot routine that's physical, but they don't always have the mental routine that's connected to it.
Correct. So if you look at the best of the best play, you look at Jack Nicklaus, you look at Tiger Woods, and you watch their routine, it's very consistent. Very consistent. In order for someone to have a consistent routine, wouldn't it make sense they need to be mentally consistent?
Absolutely.
So if you're not mentally consistent, how can you be technically consistent? So you can look like you're doing the same thing, but when I time the player's routine, it's not the same. It's like 15 seconds this time and 20 seconds the next time and 12 seconds the time after that and then 17 the time after that. It's like, where's the consistency? But if you were to go in the prime of Jack and Tiger, I bet you it's within 2 seconds, if not 1 second. Each and every time, it's always the same, very consistent. Because I think their thoughts and what they're physically doing are synced up in a way. And that's really what I'm trying to accomplish in that book, is to guide someone into how do I do that? Well, you do it by preloading the shot correctly and running what we call a mental program, a simple way of controlling your thoughts in a productive manner that promotes that you get the result that you want. See, a golfer doesn't have to worry about results. If you control what you can control, and you're consistent with your mental process, and you train appropriately to have the skill to do it, all you need a way is to promote that you're going to get the result you want. Trust it's going to happen. If you can do that, you're going to be in a position to have a good score. But if you're trying to make a good score happen, if you're trying to beat people, you're going to struggle getting the results that you want.
And I've heard you say this before, that like golf is a game of variables. There's so many variables. And if your mental game can be a constant, it gives you a huge advantage.
Absolutely. I don't know of another sport that has more variables than golf. It's one reason why I say it's the best game out there.
Yeah.
Pretty sad coming from a guy who competed in rifle shooting all these years. But golf is definitely probably the greatest sport because there's so many variables. Think about all the variables the sport has. You don't control when you tee off in a tournament. Somebody else has a schedule. You don't control who you play with. You don't control the weather. The courses are always different. The shots are different from one shot to the next. The next are varying. There's so many different variables. It's like, how in the world can anything be consistent in a game with that many variables? Well, there's one thing I think can be a constant, and that's the mental game. So anytime you have a sport of variables and you can make something a constant, you now are in a position to have an advantage over your opponent.
Absolutely.
Well, the one way you can have a constant would be have a consistent mental game. If you have a consistent mental performance, that would be a constant. I can create a way to go into a shot. I can create a way to handle a shot. I can create a way to go into a tournament round. If I can do those things, I create mental consistency. If I have a good mental system that promotes good technical consistency, wouldn't the result be good?
Certainly should.
So if that's the case, then all I got to do is that. And partner those two up and you're good to go. And that is what the journey of the book is all about, is creating consistency in the sport of variables.
And we've talked a lot about this on our Patreon channel. We have a Patreon membership. So for those of you who are not already Patreon members, we talk about the preload that we discuss, mental program, and we go into a lot more detail on some of our added content for our silver and gold level members. So I highly recommend you check that out if you're interested in learning a little bit more about what we're doing. But back to you. I want to know what has been the response that you've gotten since you've written the book. What has been the response that you've gotten from your clients or people who've purchased it that have messaged you?
The response I've gotten is, I wish I would have read this sooner.
Yeah.
Why didn't I know this beforehand? That's the biggest response you get, which to me is a good compliment to have.
Just got an email the other day from a coach who has high school players who's buying one for every single member of the team because of the way that it's so easy to apply to that age group. So I feel like we're getting more and more people who are finding out about the book, want it for their team and want it for their players.
Yeah, we have college coaches that they buy the book and do a book review at the beginning of the year for their team. So that, to me, is kind of cool. And it's also a great introduction as far as how we teach and how we approach the mental game. We come from a performance direction. So the terminology that we're going to use is going to be slightly different of some other mental coaches out there. We use terms like preload and mental program and reload and performance analysis. And these are different terms that, other people would call it a pre-shot routine, post-shot routine, or a journal, right? And we use different language because it was developed by an individual that was competing, that wanted to implement a mental system to have consistency. And of course, that was our dad, Lanny, in the 1970s. And when he developed that, then he's like, okay, well, what am I doing? Like the thought, like preload. Why do we use the term preload? His whole thing is, okay, I'm going to load the gun because you can't shoot a 10 if you don't have a bullet in the chamber to shoot. It's
Right.
like in archery, you have to knock the arrow. Without the arrow in the bow, you're not going to hit the target. It's like you have to have the ball.
Right.
You have to tee the ball up before you hit it. Otherwise, you can't even start the hole, right? So you're already loading in a sense. And so in his mind, he was like, well, what if I did the same thing with my thoughts?
Yes.
Well, then what comes before loading? It would have to have the word pre in it. So that's how he came with the word preload. He's like, okay, I'm just going to preload my thoughts before I go into the action phase of shooting the shot. Well, that works in everything. I need to preload my thoughts before I go into a golf shot. And this is why we look at it as a shooting sport. There's so many commonalities between shooting and golf. It is a golf shot. I have a shot and rifle. You have a shot and golf. And what do you have? You have a score at the end of the day. Best score wins. And even to where if there's a tie, they have what? A playoff. They have a shoot-off. So you have so many common things with it. But the terminology is from a competitor that's going through there. And I think one of the reasons why so many people that have used mental management over the years that like it is because they're competitors. And it's almost like they can put themselves in the shoes of the founder of mental management. Say, okay, I'm creating my own type of mental system. And that's what I want to do is take someone on a journey. For the mind, it's Kevin's journey, but every player is a version of Kevin.
Okay, what would your advice be to a coach? If you could just give one piece of advice to golf coaches outside of obviously buying the book and having your team read it, like what would be a good takeaway for coaches?
Wow, that's a hard one. There's so many so many stuff I could go into. The one that sticks out the most is ask your players what they did well at the end of every day, whether it's a training session or a competition round. First question would be, what did you do well today? Get the player to have to look at what they did well. In the sport of golf, one of the things I see that is problematic, but it's just socially acceptable, is it's okay to talk about your bad play when you're done. And look, I'm not saying you can't learn from your failure. I mean, definitely failure is a must in order to be successful. But to me, we discount the successes if we jump straight into why didn't I do better at this? Why wasn't this better? I would like more coaches to focus on, okay, what did you do well today first? Let's talk about that before we go into the other stuff, and because then they go and they don't play well and they're like, well, why didn't I play well? Okay, then you're telling me in 18 holes, one thing didn't go well. Like there's something, and that's the other thing I like about golf. I mean, you've got tee shots, you got approach shots, you got chips and pitches, and you got bunkers, and all these different shots that you're having. You're telling me that not one of them went well? I mean, there's certainly you did better in one area than another. I would advise them, get in the habit of asking your players, look, what did you do well today, and get them talking about that sooner rather than later.
Can you give a little bit of insight into why that matters so much?
Because we're trying to build and protect the self-image of the athlete. So if I'm a coach, like I'll give you so I had a 3-year stint of being in charge of a program. So I had athletes I was in charge of. Well, who's building themselves up? When we're talking about high school athletes, right? High school athletes in the teenage years are not building themselves up. They get in a habit of tearing each other down, and they tear each other down. They tear themselves down. They don't mean to. They just do. And then they go into college, and they've got this habit of doing it, And now they're pretty good at it once they get to that next level. So now they're going into adulthood with bad mental habits. What if we got them in a good habit of building self-image? Well, how do you build self-image? Well, the first way you build self-image is to remind yourself what you're really good at.
Right.
And you need warranted praise from that. So if I have someone that is training and, in my sport, we're shooting 3 different positions and we're training all 3 positions, at the end of the day, it's okay, what went well today? I would always get, well, standing went real good, or prone went really good, or kneeling went really good. I'm like, okay, why was it good today? And I'd get response like, well, I got in a rhythm, or I had a really good hold. I'm like, great, tell me about it. And then they would go leaving thinking they were what? A great standing shooter, a great prone shooter, whatever. Well, just take that and twist it to golf. What did you do well today? Man, I putted really well today. Tell me about it. Well, I was really good about reading the greens, or I was really good with my speed, or my stroke was really consistent today. I mean, it's going to change from day to day, but now that player's leaving thinking, well, I'm really good at this. Okay, what if you really are good at that on a consistent basis? What's going to happen to your game? It's only going to get better and better and better. And so what if you went one step further and the coach was doing that and the parent was doing that, and maybe you have 2 teammates to each other was doing that? Now the player doesn't play well, and they're like being asked, okay, what went well? Something. Now they're forced to have to come with that one
You're
thing.
like conditioning them a little bit to focus on the positives at the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's just one thing. Well, what if that one thing was good? Like I remember talking to a player once. He said, well, what do you have a day that nothing went good? I'm like, okay, what do you mean? And he went on for 15 minutes telling me how bad this day was. And I was like, oh my gosh, it was a nightmare. He was describing a literal nightmare. And then his dad looked at me and goes, wait a minute, you're talking about a tournament in Ohio. And he goes, yeah, you caddied for me. And he goes, yeah, and that day you're talking about, you birdied the first hole. He goes, what's the only thing that went good? Now, he spent 15 minutes talking about all the bad. But my view would be, well, wait a minute. When do you not want to birdie the first hole?
I would think you always want to.
Yeah, in golf.
And I don't even know golf, but I think you always want to.
I want to do that. I want to start off good. Okay.
Right.
What if we spent 15 minutes talking about that? What did we improve the probability of doing? Maybe we improve the probability of, I don't know, having a good start.
Absolutely. Yes.
My sarcasm
I love it.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, having a good start. But we live in a society that we jump to the negative. It doesn't matter what we talk about. Just, it's just in general the way we are. And we focus a lot on accomplishment, and which is important, but it's almost to the point to where we overshadow the progress, how small or big, but we need to focus on the progress. I mean, what progress are you making? And we have a saying, you demand progress, not perfection. Well, how can I demand progress if I don't look at the progress that I'm making on a daily basis? What went well today? Well, I did this good. Okay, great.
And in golf, it's impossible to demand perfection. You're never going to reach it.
Yeah. So to come to full circle, what should people change? They should change the way they evaluate things and say, okay, I'm going to leave training. I'm going to leave a tournament day thinking about, okay, what's the one thing that went well today? I'm going to focus on that. Hopefully they have a lot of days where they can't think of one. They think of 2 or 3. That's what I think would be really cool.
Well, that would be even better.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending time talking about For the Mind and what you're doing with golf. If you're a golf coach or a player or someone who wants to learn more about how you can get involved with mental management, you can pick up a copy of For the Mind, or you can call our office or check us out at mentalmanagement.com. We would love to help you. Go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to see more. Join our Patreon membership. We'd love to have you. Have a blessed rest of your day.